So hello, my name is Lily Genghis. I'm the Chief Tech Community Officer at the Caper Center. You may be wondering, what the heck is a Chief Tech Community Officer? Well, I'll just tell you that it's really a combination of my life to some degree. I started my career as a software engineer. How many of you here are engineers? Give some love to the software, yay. I also have a deep love for the community, specifically increasing representation of folks that look like me in my community and also the folks who are coming in. How many of you are also immigrants? I'm a proud immigrant. Single parent home? Yep. How many of you are first to graduate in your family from college? All right, so these are all the statistics that we hear that are telling us that we shouldn't be in this room, right? But let's remember, those statistics were just the statistics of the past. And here we are changing the narrative because we are the next factor. I think I'm super excited to really get this panel started to discuss that. What does that mean? What is the resilience? What is that inspiration? What has been those key moments in our lives, especially the times that we're living now, that have really helped us get to where we're at, especially in this field, in the tech workplace, as well as being founders. So with that said, I'm super excited to get started, and I'll do a quick intro of all of our amazing panelists, and then we'll jump right into the questions. So first we have Christy. Say hello, Christy. She's coming all the way from Arlington, Virginia. She started her career developing scientific instruments that have been deployed in the South Pole Biomedical Research Lab's suborbital balloon trajectories. She's pretty much a genius, right? Yeah.
I don't know about that.
She's awesome because she's a genius. She has also co-authored over a dozen publications on research and development in scientific measures, systems, and received numerous awards for her work, including from the American Astronomical Society, Science Foundation, Arizona, Forbes magazines. Oh my goodness, it continues. And she currently works as a field technology architect at In-Q-Tel, a nonprofit venture capital that does strategic investments in tech startups to support national security of the US and its allies. Please welcome Christy. And welcome Iori from LA. She creates product and technology solutions at the top consumer technology startups, spanning from personal care, e-commerce, to transportation. She's currently at Bird Rights, one of the nation's fastest startups. How many of you have seen those birds around the city? All right, she's behind the scenes making some of that happen. She's a software product manager working on the reliability of its IoT ecosystem. Prior to joining Bird, Iori headed up the research and development at Walker & Co. Brands, which was recently acquired by Procter & Gamble, known for its iconic brands, Bevel and Form Beauty. So welcome, welcome. And then we have Brittany Jones, visiting all the way from Chicago. She's a senior diversity recruiting program manager at Oracle. She supports Oracle Talent Advisory Team and diverse strategy towards recruiting for professional roles across North America and Canada, with an emphasis on product development, corporate architecture, F&A, legal, and marketing. Brittany's personal mission is to make sure that when a candidate is being considered, they're being considered holistically. So give it up for Brittany. Last but not least, say hello, Chloe. Chloe's visiting from all the way, she's the local here now, right, from San Jose. Chloe is a social impact tech entrepreneur who is passionate about uniting young activists around shared causes and movements. Chloe founded her company, Community X, in light of her dad's very personal experience with police discrimination and misconduct that left him permanently handicapped. Community X is a tech startup that represents the social impact interests and movements of young activists across the globe. The company stands behind every cause that is community, positive, from gun control to racial justice to the climate crisis. Let's give it up for this amazing panel of change makers, leaders, and technologists. So with that said, one of the parts that I really, since we're here celebrating the accomplishments, the progress, the resilience, intelligence, the contribution of all of you all in this tech industry, I wanted to start the panel and really discuss what are some of those women in this space that have helped you get to where you're at now.
I guess I'll start. So when I think about a woman in particular, it has to be my sister. She has been there with me from the start and has been one of those people that has pushed me to explore science, technology, engineering, and math. by her own exploration. So I was only 3 years younger than her, and I looked up to her. And ever since then, she's basically been able to be that support system there with me, pushing me to make difficult decisions, to take on challenges head on, and then just to laugh. And so I think that if you don't have a sister, if you have a sister friend, or just your peers in your industry, I think those are the women that continuously inspire me, the ones that are going through it with me in the trenches and are helping me, look up to certain individuals or find mentors in the field, but can actually relate as we go through this journey together.
For me, I'd have to say Oprah Winfrey. I'm sure all of you guys know who she is, right? Just seeing her journey on television, and now she has her own network, and just the resiliency that she's demonstrated as a woman and as a woman of color has just really inspired me, and that's someone who I also feel challenged me in different parts of my career, and that's someone that I feel definitely, I look up to.
For me, this is actually kind of a difficult question because I was raised in a Mormon family in suburban Utah and in Las Vegas, and so growing up, the women in my lives, most of them didn't have careers, and a lot of them didn't even have a college education. And the women that did have careers were often, scantily clad on the side of a billboard in Las Vegas. And so I didn't really have women role models growing up, and so I actually looked to fictional characters. I developed a love of space exploration when I was 10 years old, and so watching Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek DS9 and seeing characters like Captain Janeway and Colonel Kira were sort of the role models that I needed when I was growing up.
Maybe we can use some. Great.
I'll use this one for now.
Great. She's back.
9. No? Okay. All right. I would have to say my mom, of course, and I think I could say it's because without her I wouldn't be here, and intellectually we'd all understand that. But from my perspective, it's a level deeper because if it weren't for my mom, my dad wouldn't be here because she saved his life. Quickly, the year before I was born, my dad was getting ready to work a night shift in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago, heard a loud banging on the door, went to go see what it was, and by the time he got there, it was off its hinges, and a group of plainclothes men opened fire on him over a dozen times. As he was bleeding to death in the hallway of my grandmother's home, they realized that they had the wrong address, and it was a case of a mistaken identity. And my mom was actually hiding upstairs in his bedroom. And 5 minutes went by, no ambulance was called. 10 minutes went by, no ambulance was called. 15, and after 20 minutes, even though my mom knew that by coming out and entering into a situation where there was gunfire, she could have potentially lost her life, she still exited the room and demanded that they call the ambulance, and that's what saved my dad's life, and it's the reason why my siblings and I are all here today.
Thank you for sharing that. Going into, and Chloe, maybe we can start with you, going into how you've been able, you as an individual, but also as a family, what has been some of those areas that you've been able to pivot or persevere? If you can share a little bit more of the work that you're doing that got inspired by what the situation of your father. Maybe you can share us, what was a key moment where you're like, I have to do this or not?
Yeah, I think growing up, I always felt so helpless because my dad is permanently handicapped because of what happened to him. He still has a bullet fragment lodged in his spine because if they were to take it out, he would become a paraplegic. So all my life growing up, all I got to do was witness pain. And so after graduating from Howard and getting a job at Google, I was like, wow, this is great. I can actually start to do something now. And then 2014 came, and 2015 when issues like the ones that my dad experienced were coming to light in the media for the first time in Ferguson and New York and Baltimore and Florida. And I was like, wow, this is great. I'm here. There's got to be a tool that I can use to like help me start to create some momentum within this space. And the first question that I asked myself was like, okay, who else cares about this? And I think that's a question that a lot of like young people, young activists, and just civil rights activists in general ask themselves too, like, okay, who else cares about climate change? Who else cares about LGBTQ rights? And that simple question, sitting in the middle of Silicon Valley, I was unable to answer. And I realized that it was because technology hadn't been built to address issues like this. And so what we do is we create digital experiences that connect people around shared causes.
Thank you for sharing that. Christy, can you share a specific moment that you were like, oh my gosh, like this is the pivot or persevere? Like what was the moment that helped you get to where you're at now that you recall that was life-changing or career-changing perhaps?
Yeah, so there was a lot of moments of persevere, but it was actually a pivot moment that was the most difficult. And to give you a sense of just how difficult that was, it was when I was 10 that I decided I was going to get a PhD in astrophysics. I was a very strange 10-year-old. So fast forward 15 years later, I'm 25, I'm in the midst of my PhD, and I am living a life that my 10-year-old self could only dream about. But I realized that what I was doing in the PhD program didn't really make sense for my long-term ambitions. I wasn't learning the things that I really wanted to be learning. And I certainly could have finished the PhD and had the career that I have now, but the opportunity costs of those few extra years in that program just didn't really seem worth it. Like it seemed more like I was there to get a title than to actually develop myself as a professional. And so, but the problem is that my 10-year-old self was so committed to that goal that as I was evaluating whether to leave or not, I would spend nights just crying into a glass of wine because I felt like I was betraying myself, that I was betraying that 10-year-old version of myself. And but I ultimately decided that that's what I needed to do, and so I quit my PhD and I joined an asteroid mining startup, and it has completely changed the direction of my career in the most positive way possible. And even though that startup ultimately failed, it introduced me to the entrepreneurial community and is the reason that I currently work for a venture capital firm.
And I'd actually like to chime in on that. So my first job out of college, I worked in a startup called High Ground, and I was the 11th employee, went through the trenches of that and was exposed to being a part of a fast-paced environment, the understanding of what seed funding was. And it was in that moment that I decided to create my own nonprofit as well. So I founded a nonprofit called Chicago Youth Opportunity Initiatives. We help kids that are in foster care and wards of the state. And so we have a mentoring program, a youth development program that meets on a monthly basis. And then at the end of the year, we have a career exploration where we partner with companies and just giving them exposure to internships and full-time opportunities. But it was in that moment working for a startup when I realized that I wanted a piece of the pie, that I really wanted to take initiative and create my own future. And it was being around other entrepreneurs and really seeing just what that lifestyle would look like, being able to create your own path, that, I didn't have to, just kind of follow everyone else and be a part of that. I could create my own path. And so, I definitely understand what you're saying in regards to entrepreneurship and being a part of that startup environment.
Your pivot, persevere.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I'm a double startup queen too. And I will say, anytime you're making that decision, it's a pivot or a moment in your life. And so for me, My name actually means I have survived a long and difficult journey, and I truly believe that. I ended up, graduating from not the best public school in New Jersey as the first Black valedictorian. Ended up doing chemical engineering because, of course, it was hard and I had to survive that journey. But I was doing it as the only Black female woman in the chemical engineering department, but also one of 3 in the entire school of thousands. And so in that moment, I realized I'd been working hard to defy all these odds, and there was this opportunity to, turn down a job at one of the top consulting firms or top CPG companies that ended up actually acquiring the company at the end, or to join a startup. And my dad asked me to be responsible, that we needed me to, contribute to a lot of expenses. I needed to hold my own in the world, and that this wasn't a smart risk. But they didn't understand what it meant to come to Silicon Valley, to work at a startup, to be able to grow up the ranks. And that experience just fundamentally transformed who I am as an engineer, as a product manager, allowing me to pivot into the more technology side from the hardware side and really start to work at the intersection of digital and physical product and make products for people who look like me in an industry where we weren't being considered. And so that, I think, is very pivotal and allows me to continue to take risks today.
Great, thank you. Let's give it up for these ladies. These stories are just simply amazing. And all this work is also very close to the work that we do at the Caper Center, which I highly recommend for you all to check out our leakytechpipeline.com website that has a study that looks at the entire, from pre-K through 12 all the way to being in startups and getting your investment to actually being an investor as well, where you can identify some of these barriers. And having representation matters. It's important. This is why we're having these types of spaces and events, because sometimes there's a whole saying of you can't be it until you see it. Well, a lot of the times we've been in situations where we are the first ones and we are the ones being able to create it. And so to go into that topic, specifically, as we know that the need for this and looking at as a competitive advantage even for the US compared to the global world, we know that we gotta start to get more of our folks of color into these roles. But we know that the tech industry is failing at it, right? And so the stat shows that less than 3% actually include this. And so question for Brittany and Yori, given that you're currently in the industry, based on your past or current experience, what do you think have been some of the initiatives or programs that have worked well in making some of the tech industry be more inclusive and more representative, but what of them haven't?
Sure. So I think, programs such as Women in Tech Festival, Women Impact Technology, Lesbian to Tech, being a part of these events are allowing for women to get the exposure to companies such as Oracle and other organizations that are looking to bring in a more diverse workforce. So just very thankful for that. But outside of, the sponsoring events, another thing is, I think podcasts are also providing women a platform to be able to listen in and contribute to other experiences that you're able to share aloud, right? I think another thing too is entrepreneurship, right? Being able to create your own platforms for women to be a part of is another great tactic in the tech industry for people to really learn a little bit more about how they can be involved and for you to be an influencer for other women. So I think there are a lot of things happening in tech for women, and it's going to take time. It's not something that we're going to see done overnight. But I would say, just continuing to support these types of initiatives and just being outspoken and being willing to admit and raise your hand if you want to see something done. But most importantly, being the change and being the front of making that initiative happen for yourself.
Yeah, and since Brittany highlighted the positive, I think I can talk about how we can all improve. And I think when we think about equity versus equality and the giving someone an opportunity or allowing them to come in the space of a tech company, a space that they deserve to be in is one thing, but giving them the tools to actually succeed in that space is another thing. And so I think that one thing that we can hold ourselves more accountable for is understanding that there are intersectionalities that aren't necessarily addressed, that other people aren't thinking about, and if you are bringing someone into this environment, how can you uplift them to be able to do the job that they came there to do without all the extra stuff that they have to worry about that nobody else does. And I think that that's one aspect of it. But I also think that there's a little bit of kind of ignoring the external pressures that we face. So just like over the last few weeks, the concept of like women's rights, that is not something that sits outside the workplace. We bring that in. And without acknowledging those things, when you're bringing people in that environment, those stressors that are relevant to who they are as human beings, we're not doing ourselves a real service to allowing people to bring their whole selves to work when you're asking them to leave half of what they're dealing with at the door. So, yeah.
And I want to say another thing too. It's like being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Like really putting yourself out there. And if you have a question, or it's education, it's pulling somebody aside and just asking them and feeling comfortable with, you know what, this might not sound right, but like, what does this look like? Or like, when I say this, or when I do this, does this affect you? I think that will solve a lot of the problems that we have right now. And obviously, it's easier to say than do it. But I think a lot of companies offer employee resource groups. They create a community. They have a platform for you to, get the mentorship and build allies and create a foundation for yourself to learn. And it's taking those opportunities to learn and, create an environment for yourself that is diverse. So you can't depend on a company to do that for you, right? You need to do that outside of the organization and build those relationships on your own. And like I was saying earlier, I think, events such as this one is a great way to do that. And then leveraging your resources, right? So just educating yourself outside of what's already given to you.
I think I have to disagree a little bit. I agree with most of what you said, but the mentorship aspect is one thing that I think my friends and I in tech really want. We're looking for these strong women mentors who have the bandwidth to actually mentor. And so I think that that's one thing the technology industry could do a little bit better, is cultivating those levels of actually getting mentors. And then, we do have a lot of things we deal with on a day-to-day, which may make it hard to actually facilitate that, but I think that that would be very helpful as we start to navigate our careers forward. So,
Great, thank you. And given that Chrissy and Chloe are also in different industries, but Chloe, since you were at Google, now that you've left, maybe you can have some real talk of what are some of the things that you wish you would have, that the employer would have been provided to make it be more inclusive, or just even be seen more.
Sure. I think that Google actually does a really good job in terms of creating communities that people can go to if they need something specific. So their ERG program is actually really well thought out and was really helpful for me during my time there. I think one of the things that most tech companies can improve on is figuring out how to leverage their existing platforms in a way that is more beneficial to communities in times of need. I think that that's definitely something that could be figured out and better implemented in the years to come.
Definitely, we're starting to see a lot of that. If you read some of the current headlines of employees becoming activists and CEOs becoming activists. And so I think that we are in times where the responsibility of us consumers, the makers, and how we apply it is really now a discussion that we need to be having in the workplace. And Christy, for you, you're in a totally different side of the nation, but also in a different environment. Tell us what your experience is like in QTEL.
So in QTEL, comparatively does pretty well. If you look at our investment staff, it's about half women, which is rare within the venture capital community. Now, if you look at our technical staff, we need to improve. I definitely, InQtel is a place that feels very, very welcoming, and that there really isn't necessarily a gender divide. But I think when you look more broadly, and my career has definitely been in the space industry, I had a really awesome opportunity a couple years ago to engage with the United Nations on their Space for Women initiative, which was really focused on how do we get more women involved in the space industry, and how do we make sure that the space industry is benefiting women. And so I got to work with representatives from all over the world. And I think what I really took away from that experience is one that there is commonality across the entire globe in terms of the challenges we face, but there's also a lot of nuance and a lot of differences depending on the specific country, the specific subculture. And so it's important to sort of find a balance between that, of finding that common ground, but also respecting and appreciating those differences, and realizing that those differences mean that we're not all going to always agree, and that's okay. And in fact, it is that tension of disagreement that really allows the world to progress as society, and that we need to progress, as humanity as a whole and not as one gender.
Great, thank you. And following on the thread of tech as something that is a tool that can be used for good or for bad, depending on whose hands it is, or the ethical discussions that also we need to start having more as more emerging technologies, as the AI start to really come to play. And specifically at the Caper Center, we have this mantra of tech done right, which is really focusing on how can we use tech to be gap closing and be inclusive and create opportunities for education, healthcare, and different other areas that are pertinent needs in our community. And so to all of you, feel free to do popcorn style, whoever wants to jump in. But what's your view on what does tech done right mean to you, and and what would you like this audience to leave with, and leaving with that knowledge of like we want to make sure that you're utilizing this opportunity and technology for X, Y, and Z. So if you can just share what is from your perspective, your experience, and the current world that you're in, what does tech done right entail?
I guess I'll go ahead and start. So for me, whether I'm developing a scientific instrument or whether I'm evaluating a technology for investment, I always try and look at technology through the lens of what I refer to as socio-technical systems. And so I am a proponent of socio-technical systems engineering, which I basically sort of means is that when we're thinking about a technology, we should not just be thinking about how do we design this to meet specific requirements, but think about it from what are the ways that this can be used, misused, or misunderstood, and what can be the impacts on individuals, on communities, on society, when this technology is used in those potentially unexpected ways. And I think AI and ML is a really good example to show why socio-technical systems engineering is important, is because when you're developing an AI algorithm, you're using training data, and if the data you're using has a bias in it, then you're perpetuating a bias. And when we look at society, a lot of people do not understand technology, and you can use technology to justify bias. And so if you're using AI in such a way that people can use it as justification, because they can point to it and say, hey, look, technology told me this was the right answer, and so it can't be wrong because technology is always right. And that is something that people will do because there's so many people that do not understand technology. And so that then allows technology to be used as a weapon to harm communities that are already underrepresented. And so that's why whenever you're developing a system, when you take that socio-technical perspective, it allows you to take a deeper look and make sure what you're designing isn't going to have those biases built in, and you can put in that extra mile to make sure that it's not going to be used in a way that will be detrimental to society.
I think for me, one of my favorite poems is by Langston Hughes, and in it he says, tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes, and nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. And as a founder and a CEO, I think that's important to me, because when I think about tech done right, business done right, it's not just about bringing different kinds of people to the table, but at the foundational level early on, thinking about what that table looks like. Mm-hmm. And when I envision mine, I don't see like 12 mahogany chairs gathered round, because not everybody's gonna require that. Not everybody's gonna be able to sit comfortably in that. So figuring out what the different components are, of that, and making sure that at the ground level, we're building towards people's needs so that 10 years, 15 years from now, we don't have to deal with all of this retroactive programming and because of systemic issues that have been built into the industry.
I would chime in as well. So piggybacking on that, right, in terms of having a seat at the table, A big thing for me is if you see a problem, to solve it. And so I think that goes beyond just ethnicity. I think that goes beyond age. I think a lot of it for me is just having a diverse skill set of individuals who can come in and be creative and have that entrepreneurial mindset and being able to add value that way. And so, you know, I think tech done right is continuing to challenge others and challenge yourselves to continue to solve problems and bringing in both men, women, transgender, literally everyone who comes from all demographic, all ethnicities to provide value, you know, within the organization.
For me, working as a product manager and engineer at the intersection of digital and physical product, at Walker & Company, I was directly making products for people of color to be inclusive so that all people could be seen. And at Bird, I'm building reliable transportation so that people in underserved communities and beyond that can have the transportation to places they need to go to do the things that they want to be able to do. And I think that as we think about the IoT ecosystem, the Google Homes, the Alexas, our cell phones, and how they all interact, in order to build inclusive systems that are scalable in different environments and countries, there has to be people there who understand how to build them, but also can do that empathetically. And so for me, tech done right means anything that we build here being scalable for other being scalable for other communities and individuals so that they can have the same access and opportunities that we do to live the same types of lives that we do.
Great. With that said, we are, I think, right at the time limit.
One question, if somebody wants one question.
Great. We'll have one question, and I'm going to ask for 1 extra minute to close it up for them with your next factor of how we can stay engaged with you all after this. And so if there's somebody who has a question, come on. We had a great, awesome insights and ideas. Questions from the audience? What? We covered it all? All right, we're done. So I'll take that extra minute of the question just to give you all an opportunity to also just close it up of, since giving this is the next factor, what's next for you all and how do we stay engaged? We want to keep learning more and how can we also just follow your journey and be part of it? So if you want to do it in a quick 30 seconds, starting from...
I can start.
All right, popcorn style. Let's go.
So I have a booth here today, Oracle, and so you can follow me at the Oracle booth. You can add me on LinkedIn. You know, I'm happy to chat with you one-off a little bit more about, you know, what I'm doing in terms of the nonprofit as well as the opportunities that Oracle has and how we're creating a more diverse workforce. So I look forward to meeting some of you and feel free to stop by.
I work for a venture capital firm, so I'm always looking for technologies to evaluate and hopefully invest in. So if you have a technology company, and when I say technology, I mean technology across the board. We invest in all sorts of technologies. Please come talk to me. Definitely want to learn about your ideas, your companies, and where they're headed.
My team and I will be here, and we're also launching our mobile app at our Social Impact Summit in September at Santa Clara University. So if you're in town, we'd love to see you there.
So yeah, you have my Instagram above. I'm also on LinkedIn, but in general, I love talking about new trends in the product space, so e-commerce, transportation, anything in that intersection, data, as well as talking about how we can continue to, cultivate a pipeline of really strong technical women to fulfill the needs of the technology industry. So yeah.
Well, thank you, and I extend an invitation to you all to come to Oakland and visit us at the Caper Center. And let's end with an amazing applause for these awesome leaders.
Thank you, guys.